In this video, we're going to talk about meeting facilitation, how to lead and facilitate effective business meetings. Meetings are really important to be successful in today's business world because meetings are such a big part of a normal business job. It's not uncommon for us to spend half of our day, 20-30% of our day just in meetings, discussions, sharing of information, decision making. A lot of collaboration happens in meetings. Yes, we have emails. Yes, we have new tools like Slack, Microsoft Teams, but we still need to have meetings to bring people together, to discuss things live. And especially in a virtual environment, meetings have increased. The number of meetings that happen have increased. And so thinking about running effective meetings is so essential. And the good thing is, effective meetings are very simple. By just getting some of the basics right, your meetings will be really effective. And it's not rocket science, it's very simple tactics like make sure you have an agenda, you're clear on what the purpose is, simple logistics, facilitating an engaging discussion, and following up. And in this video, I want to share my personal habits and tactics that I think effective business leaders and management consultants use to run effective meetings. My name is Felix Haller. I'm a former manager at Bain Company, and I spent over 5 years working across industries, across functions, and I've probably been involved and facilitated hundreds of meetings. I don't even know how many good ones, also many bad ones, and I've realized how important it is to prepare, organize effective meetings, then have a good facilitation and engaging discussion and making sure that you follow up. You have good meeting notes after a meeting and how critical that is for one's personal career, but also to drive topics forward and improve the organization overall. That's why I want to use this video to share 7 simple, basic habits or steps to make sure that every meeting is fairly effective, up to standard. That doesn't mean that every meeting will be a success, but at least you will have done the proper preparation. I've done a good job running the meeting and hopefully following up after the meeting. The first step for every good meeting is to be very clear on the purpose of the meeting. Who hasn't been in a meeting where you dial in, you join the meeting, you don't even know what the meeting is about? The meeting might have a descriptive title like status update or sales team, but you don't really know what the purpose of the meeting is. Is the purpose of the meeting to brainstorm new initiatives? Is it to give an update to supervisors? The first step, and it's really important to be crystal clear on what's the theme and the overall objective of that particular meeting. And a helpful structure to think about it is whether the purpose of the meeting is to inform, to discuss, or to decide something. Obviously, a meeting could have a couple of these objectives. We could say, okay, the purpose is to inform about this topic, but then make a decision on this topic. But in general, it is helpful to think about the overall meeting first and then about the different agenda items and whether each of the agenda items is to inform, to discuss, or to decide. So the first step is to just write out in a sentence, the purpose of this meeting is to inform about blah, blah, blah. Or the purpose of the meeting is to discuss topic A. Just by having a very clear statement at the top is already really helpful to align all the participants and being clear on this is the overall objective. This is what we're running towards. And then you can go in more granular detail by thinking about the agenda. Which is why the next step is creating a specific agenda. This is probably the most important step in the preparation for a meeting, is to make sure you have an agenda. And an agenda doesn't have to be fancy with a ton of action items and specific objectives, but it's definitely recommended to have 2, 3, 4 simple, clear bullets that state what are the different agenda items. So what are we doing in a 45-minute meeting? What are the 3 objectives we're driving towards? What are the 3 activities? And here it's helpful to be specific and using an action verb or an outcome. It's not uncommon for an agenda item to be very descriptive, a one-word or two-word action item. For instance, status update or initiatives. That obviously doesn't say a lot about what we're actually doing in that action item or what we're trying to achieve. A better approach would be to be very specific and using an action verb. For instance, inform, discuss, decide. Inform the department about updated travel policies, or discuss or brainstorm initiatives to improve sales, or decide on the 3-4 top candidates for the next round. These examples are way more specific, and it's very clear what we're actually doing when we get to that action item. Additionally, if you know your 3-4 agenda items, it's helpful to think about prioritization. Which ones should come first, which ones after. In general, you want to start with the most important ones first, just to make sure that you will be able to cover them in case they run over. However, sometimes one agenda item might inform another one, or if you know that an important meeting participant will only show up the last 10-15 minutes, maybe you want to switch it around, but just be deliberate about how you prioritize and how you sequence the agenda items. The next step is a very simple one, sharing the meeting invite. Just make sure that every participant has the same synced calendar entry on their calendars. That's pretty simple with Microsoft Outlook or whatever tool you use in your company. And in addition to sharing the invite, the critical part here is to be very clear on what the agenda is and optimally put the agenda already in the meeting invite. A lot of meeting invites, they just state the topic of the meeting, and then they have maybe a dial-in information or location, and you'll probably be able to see who the participants are, but they don't say exactly specifically what the outcomes of the meeting are and or the agenda items. And so the best approach here is to share one synced calendar entry with everybody and add and include the agenda in the meeting. The next key tactic is to always try to start your meeting on time and end it on time. Well, I think it's pretty obvious you want to start on time. You want to respect everybody's time. You don't want to shrink a 30-minute meeting down to 20 minutes because you start 10 minutes delayed. I think it's even more important to end the meeting somewhat on time. For instance, you could 5 minutes before the end step back and say something like, hey, we're coming to the end. We have 5 minutes left, and then make sure that you end the meeting on a high note, that you wrap up the meeting properly. Because the worst thing to end a meeting is to run over and then have it end somewhat confusingly and people not knowing what the next steps are, and then like, I got to jump to the next meeting, and then everybody's like, oh, we had a good discussion, but we didn't have a clear end to the meeting. And so you always want to make sure that you have 5 minutes at the end to wrap up the meeting. Recap the key decisions, the key next steps and action items that the group aligned on, and then suggest specific next steps. For instance, we didn't get to finish this agenda item. I'm going to schedule another meeting with the same group or a smaller group to discuss it. But the key is to make sure that you have a couple minutes at the end to properly wrap up the meeting, even if you didn't get through all the agenda items. And if you got through all of them, even better, but then just wrap up and say, okay, quick recap, we talked about this, and that. We made these decisions, and this is what we're going to do next. That way it's a well-rounded, successful meeting. The next step or key habit for successful meeting facilitation is to focus on an engaging discussion. So when the meeting starts, you start the meeting off by providing a little bit of context, setting the scene. These are the objectives. These are the agenda items we're going to go through in this sequence. Once it's clear to the group what you're trying to achieve in that session, you want to make sure you hand it over and open the discussion and get everybody's input, because that's the purpose of the meeting, right? At least if it's a brainstorming meeting, a discussion meeting, you want to make sure that you hear people's opinions. So your job typically as a facilitator is not to be the one that talks the most. Your job is to be the conductor, to orchestrate the meeting, to facilitate it, and make sure that you get a well-rounded discussion. And so for instance, if you see one person talking a lot, you could call somebody out, or you could pre-wire people that you know might derail the meeting and make sure that they don't talk first and give other people an opinion first. This is especially helpful when you have senior people in a room or tend to agree with that person. If you have a senior respected person talk first, then you sometimes don't get as diverse of opinions because people might not like to disagree with that person. And so your focus should be on figuring out how to facilitate an engaging discussion and focusing on making sure you hear different voices, but then still keep people focused on achieving that specific agenda item. The last two steps are about wrapping up the meeting and what to do after the meeting. Number one, you want to make sure you take good meeting notes focused on decisions and action items. It's not uncommon for people to interpret meeting outcomes and what has been discussed differently. On the one hand, they might unintentionally misheard something, or they have a different agenda. So a decision on something can turn into a maybe over time by people like not being super clear on what has been decided and what the next steps are. To prevent people going away from a meeting with different interpretations, different agendas, you want to make sure that it's very clear what the results of the meeting were and what we're going to do next. And the way you do that is by writing out all the decisions that were discussed in the meeting and decided on and the specific next steps. You want to look at decisions and action items. Within the action items, what's really helpful is to think about the 3 W's: what, who, and when. So every time you write down a next step or an action item, what is it that needs to get achieved? Who is going to do it and by when? That way you have clear accountabilities. In addition to writing it all down in the meeting and recapping it at the end of the meeting, you want to send out a follow-up email. And that is the next step, and the final step of effective meetings is to send a follow-up email and then also follow up with the right owners, with the owners that own the next steps, to make sure the activities get completed. Following up is really important in project management, in achieving outcomes at work. In the business world, you constantly need to follow up and make sure things get actually completed, because everybody has so much on their plates and people sometimes deprioritize things or forget things. So you, as the owner of that project, that recurring meeting agenda, need to make sure that people actually complete their tasks. Very tactically, send out a follow-up email with the key decisions, maybe some outstanding questions and clear action items and next steps, and then follow up regularly to make sure that things get completed. These were 7 simple tactics and habits that I think effective meeting facilitators and everybody that runs meetings, participates in meetings should follow. They're not rocket science, they're very simple steps, but I think it's really important to follow simple, basic tactics. That way your meetings will be prepared properly, they will lead to a good facilitated discussion, and you will have people following up and executing and completing their action items. And that's what a meeting is about. Being clear on what we need to achieve and then getting the group to all work together to achieve it in a structured and systematic way. Thanks for watching this video. Please let me know in the comments any other tips, tactics that you have to facilitate effective meetings and in general about effective business meetings. I would love to hear from you. Let me know. Thanks for watching. If you want to get more advice like this, practical and concise tactics that help you succeed in your career from a former manager at Bain Company, hit the subscribe button now to get weekly updates and weekly videos.